let's also shift focus to the B20 summit that was underway over the weekend. On the sidelines of the event, my colleague Parikshit Luthra caught up with Sanjiv Puri, the chairman and managing director of ITC, to get his views on the inflationary trends and the impact of climate change on the global economy.
ESG is certainly gaining currency, but we certainly need to mainstream it. We mainstream it into businesses, and there needs to be wider and deeper adoption. And there are regulations that are also emerging in this space through SEBI. I think the facets that's not received sufficient attention is the aspect of adaptation, because the world is going to cross 1.5 degrees in the near term. That's what IPCC says, and with that extreme weather events are multiplying. So how do you adapt, whether it's infrastructure, industrial supply chains, agri-value chains, water, and so on and so forth? How are we building resilience and doing adaptation to be able to live successfully through the hot new world?
Right. Sustainability, that was discussed in great detail at the summit. Uday Kotak was of the view that vulnerable countries would need $4.5 trillion over the next few years to meet their sustainability goals. In your view, when it comes to financing the climate agenda of developing nations, what is the kind of funding, the kind of mechanism we now need?
So if you look at funding, this is an area where progress has been inadequate, and the amount of climate funding coming is very small compared to what is required. Now, to accelerate public resources, I think there are two really ideas on the table. One is the facets about how can multilateral developmental agencies play a bigger role in it. The second is what was spoken about this morning on the SDG Acceleration Fund. And of course, the third that is being discussed but not sufficiently actioned is how are the developed economies providing resources for the global south, because the cause of emissions lies in the developed economies. The impact is being felt by global south. In the last COP, there was this loss and damage fund came, but that's only one facet about it. Now, as far as private capital is concerned, I think the way to unlock it is to make the economics attractive. Solar is a great example in India. It's become so economical. Now, to further accelerate private resources, I think what we have to do is that the developmental of newer technologies, newer pathways that are being articulated, whether it's storage or hydrogen and so on and so forth, I think that technology has to be made accessible either through incentives, viability gap funding, or made available without IP protection, etc., so that it's accessible and economical to people to take it. That technology is one facet of it. Second is that wherever there is a friction in the regulation that adds cost to it, can we remove that friction? And third is, of course, that we have to see how to for particularly MSMEs segment, which may not be able to make entire investments on their own. So create some models on a cluster basis where the assets can be on a shared basis. Really three opportunities for private capital to be unlocked.
Right. My final set of questions, sir. Right now we're seeing retail inflation at 7% plus, food inflation 11% plus. This is the government's big priority right now, taming inflation. How do you see this impacting consumption in the country right now? Your outlook on the consumption?
So, inflation really is on account of two factors. One is external factors, and second is the climate emergency. The world is facing this inflation pressure. India has managed it. I must in fact compliment policymakers for astute management of this. Of course, when there is inflation, it impacts consumption. As inflation has moderated, we have seen the green shoots of pickup in consumption in the rural aspects. The current inflation that we are seeing right now, it is also to some degree transitory, because of the weather events in this part of the year. Some horticulture items do get impacted traditionally. We have to monitor El Nino at a tactical level, and at a more strategic level we have to build resilience in our agri-value chains, both from a water perspective and also from a agronomy practices, so that the agri-value chains are more resilient. Global demand is not good. So in India, if you talk about consumption, I think anything that is indexed purely to the India story is resilient. Anything that is more connected to the external is not in a good wicket.
Okay, all right. That's the word coming in from ITC CMD on the sidelines of the B20 summit.